Okay, this is now going to be paintings and literature in paintings at part 3. It's from the same book, Best Christian Art by me, Pete Rogers. We are on page 491 if you're following along with the book. We're starting out this painting of the book Christmas Carol. I think Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens is the greatest novel ever written. It's magnificent. It's only like about 100 pages. You could easily read it on a weekend. And what I love so much about it is it basically shows just by changing your attitude, you can dramatically make life better for yourself and for everyone around you. So in the story, Scrooge, the evil Scrooge, changed his attitude about life and Christmas and his employee, Bob Cratchit, and he was able to help the son, Tiny Tim, survive. It's a beautiful story. I absolutely love it. There's tons of movies about it. The one with George C. Scott is fantastic. And I like the one with Bill Murray, too. Bill Murray is like an Irish Catholic guy, too. He's like one of the greatest comedians who ever lived. And his is called Scrooge. And it's, obviously more sarcastic, but it's very funny as well. Charles Dickens really was a great writer. Let me show you here. I'll get to another painting of him. So here's a picture of Charles Dickens in his studio. And he wrote other great books, A Tale of Two Cities is magnificent. It's a brutally honest book, and I actually think everybody should read that. David Copperfield, very good as well. One suggestion I would make, what I found is, a lot of these old-time books from the 1800s, they're very long. This was the Victorian Renaissance, also the time of the Catholic revival in England in the 1800s. So the books were long. They were often published in a serial form in a magazine or something or a newspaper. But what works well is to listen to them as audiobooks. I like to listen to audiobooks in the car when I'm commuting. And, I go about an hour each way. So I automatically every day get 2 hours of reading. Typical book is, I can finish it in a week, 10 hours. But with these longer books, it'll take me about 2 weeks pretty typically. They used to write in the 1800s, they called them triple-decker novels. And the libraries would like it. The novel would be in 3 parts because they could loan them out separately and get more loans on them. They were routinely 600, 700, 1,000 pages. So people nowadays don't have that much time for books that long. So again, you listen to the audio version. You can listen to the audio version on your phone or something. You can do other things while you're listening to an audiobook, while you're eating dinner, etc. And you'll get through them, and you'll be surprised how good they are. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of a lag phase. Like right now, I'm reading Ben-Hur, and I was amazed. The first 3 audio CDs, they stunk. 3 hours of just sort of a really weak introduction, and then the book became great. And you couldn't get away with that. In modern times, you got to be good by page 1 or page 2. I've read books on editing and all this other stuff. You got to be good by page 1 or 2, or the reader's not going to waste their time. Anyways, Charles Dickens here in his studio, dreaming about all his books. He's well worth reading. He reminds me a little bit of Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo is sort of the French equivalent of Charles Dickens, that they spent a lot of time setting up the backstory to make their story really great. That would be like in comparison to Oscar Wilde, whereas Oscar Wilde's full of zingers and clever quotes and jokes and funny. With Dickens and with Hugo, it's more like they build up this majestic, magnificent story. So here is Scrooge seeing the ghost of Christmas future, his own death, and no one cares about him. He was sort of an evil, selfish scumbag. But then he realizes he could turn things around, and he does, and that's magnificent. And Scrooge says, I will honor Christmas in my heart and keep it all the year. I will live in the past, present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. So he's given hope, okay, and he uses it to the max. It's a beautiful story of redemption. Oh yeah, and here it continues in the book. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. Okay, isn't that magnificent? All right, so that's some of the Scrooge stuff. Here is the cover of one of the classic comics. Kids should read this stuff, classic comics. It's a good way to introduce them to the classic books. These books are classic for a reason. They are great books. Christmas Carol is the greatest novel of all time. Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens is up there in the top 10. Magnificent story. It tells you about what happened to France in the 1890s. And people don't understand, France in the 1790s was not the same thing as America in 1776. America in 1776 had the greatest founding fathers of any country anywhere in the history of the world. Okay, those guys were good-hearted geniuses like Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, and they were great men like G.W. and John Adams and a lot of the other ones in those days. Okay, so anyways. that's a magnificent story. And the reason I like 1790s, this book, Tale of Two Cities, is in my experience, the average pro, the average Christian, they're so clueless. They're so hopelessly clueless that I'm not very optimistic for them. One of the first things you can do to have a chance of surviving the next 5 years with all the chaos happening is you have to realize that big money doesn't want you to survive. Once you understand that, then you could start to do things to help you survive. Okay, but if you place your trust in things run by big money, I think you're going to be disappointed. Okay, so, I try to give people a chance, but, it's difficult to free a fool from the chains they love. Okay, here's Victor Hugo, the great French writer. And Johnson, the English historian, used to love to say that Charles Dickens was a much better man than Victor Hugo. I can tell you, Victor Hugo's magnificent, a magnificent genius of a writer. His masterpieces were like Les Miserables and also The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And Ayn Rand used to say about Victor Hugo, he was the most amazing novelist, the greatest of all time. He says, to read his books, one feels as if they are walking into a cathedral. The way he would sort of build up and set up the story and the grandness of it, the elegance of it is just magnificent, okay? He doesn't have that many individual quotable quotes, but he would sort of put things right next to each other, something beautiful and wonderful next to something grotesque and monstrous, something good, something evil, all of these things contrasting right next to each other, like in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Esmeralda was just beautiful, okay? The Hunchback was just good. And then that evil monk who wanted Esmeralda and she didn't like him, he was evil, okay? And then in Les Mis, you've got Jean Valjean, just, like the return of Christ. And you had the bishop who forgave him, gave him another chance. That's goodness personified, maximized, Jesus Christo in living form. And then, the Thénardiers, the evil innkeeper guy who tried to screw him all over. Valjean, what's his name? I am Javert, the inspector. He was sort of the monstrous person, but noble within in his own code of values. Anyways, I love all this stuff. Okay, a little bit about these books. Okay, so Hunchback of Notre Dame, magnificent book. There's Esmeralda. There's the Hunchback, of course. They had more time in those days, and I remember he went off for a long time talking about all these little details about Paris. He loved the city, and they had more time to do that, and now he figured that was his main audience, Hugo, for that book. Okay, Les Miserables, spectacular, just spectacular book, beyond good. All right, okay, just one little page of quotes here, and then we'll finish up pretty quick. So, are people getting dumber? I think people are getting a lot dumber. I'm not kidding. There's so many neurotoxins in your food that, I routinely, like I said, my internal medicine friends tell me every single one of their patients over 60 is cognitively slow. I see a lot of people cognitively slowed after 55 years of age. I've seen a whole bunch of demented people in their 40s from the same stuff, from hypertension, from diabetes, from cerebral ischemia, and then also like from the concept of neurovascular uncoupling that I've talked about before. And it's also true that nowadays there's so many other distractions like the internet and cell phones that people don't want to sit down and read these 500 to 1,000 page books. Think about your friends, the peers and associate with. What percentage of them would be willing and able to read a triple-decker novel of 600 or more pages? And there's all these cognitive brain diseases that didn't used to even exist or be common. Things like autism, ADHD, multiple sclerosis. Increased rates of anxiety, depression, vascular cognitive impairment, diabetes-related cognitive impairment. The incidence of these things is going way, way up. People don't realize how common these things are. I see them all day long, every day. Okay, here's just a beautiful painting of Romeo and Juliet, that moment at the window. Okay, this one's by Frank Dixie from 1884. Lots of great painters from the 1800s. Okay, and like I said, Christianity's produced all this great art. I would actually say there is no culture, there is no non-Christian culture that's even in the ballpark, even remotely close to Christianity, in terms of creating beautiful art, literature, painting, sculpture. And one of the reasons why I talk about this is, the West is collapsing. The West is being pushed into you-know-what side. And, its only hope of saving itself is that people wake up and realize you don't know what you got till it's gone. Look at this, the best architecture ever made. French cathedrals like Notre Dame and Chartres. They burned down Notre Dame. They didn't burn it down completely, but they burned down a lot of it. In the Russia in the 1900s, they burnt down 48,000 churches and cathedrals. Okay, you have to understand that's what it's all about, and that's what's happening now. The best novels, we just talked about some of them: Christmas Carol, Les Mis, Quo Vadis, Brothers Karamazov. They're just magnificent. These are all Christian themes and Christian books. It produces the best literature because Christianity gets the metaphysics correctly. Okay, I don't go for this. This multicultural stuff is a bunch of BS. It's gaslighting to destroy the United States and the Western world. There are no cultures. There are no non-Christian culture that's even in the ballpark in terms of producing this great a level of beautiful painting, architecture, novels. Okay, and the scientific method came out of the Catholic Church. If anybody studies it, it's pretty easy to understand if you study. Okay, I look at Rodney Stark's books, for example. I look at Wood's books, etc. Okay, Invention of the Modern University came out of Christianity. That came out of Catholicism. Like, look at Aquinas back in the day. Okay, the best music: Bach, Handel, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Schubert, John McCormack, Luciano Pavarotti. It goes on and on and on. It's pages and pages of masterpieces. Best opera singers ever: Luciano Pavarotti, John McCormack. Okay, why does all this stuff come out of Christianity? Because it inspires people to think beyond themselves, to think beyond just themselves and their family, or perhaps their country, and to think of all mankind. To think God is a creator. He created man in his own image. Therefore, I could be a creator. It just generates that. It just does. And what I've seen with most other cultures, these godless religions and stuff, is, a lot of very nice people, a lot of very bright, talented people, but they tend to just focus on helping themselves, helping their family, and at most, helping their co-ethnics, okay? They don't tend to have this as generous of a worldview. They just don't. Yeah, sure, I know there's exceptions, but what I'm trying to say is, unless America realizes that they had something great in their traditionally Christian culture, and everybody's welcome in Christian. You don't have to be a Christian to be in a Christian culture. It welcomes everybody. You go to these other cultures, though. Go to Japan. A lot of Japanese people, very nice. They don't want foreigners, okay? Go to other cultures around the world where they take their religion and their culture seriously. They don't want foreigners, but America, with Christianity, accepts them. However, they should keep, you can't have too many persons, otherwise if you lose your Christianity, there is nothing else to replace it but atheistic Darwinism. Okay, fine. You can have people that are other faiths and religions. That's fine. Let them enjoy it. But they're not going to be able to unify the population in any useful way to maintain freedom. Where are the people, standing up for freedom in this country? There's not enough of them to keep freedom. Freedom is disappearing very rapidly, okay? And so, like in real life, anybody sees this book and they love it. They all want, to crowd around and look at it. But I'm kind of amazed on the internet. Maybe it's shadow banned or something. It gets hardly any views when I present these lectures and whatnot. But these are sort of the cultural foundations. If you just watch all these lectures, they're all free. You'll know more than, college graduates, okay? Okay, and here's something from the Bible here, from John. John chapter 13, verse 34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Just as I have loved you, you are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples. Okay, the stuff of Christ, it doesn't change. Now, there's all kinds of dogma debates amongst the different Christian sects, and I don't even get into that because I've read tons of Bible commentary, and I don't want to waste my time with minutia. The basic message of Christ: be nice to each other, treat each other as you would want to be treated, love thy neighbor, forgive each other, try to get along. That's what people need to have a successful society. Okay, here's a quote from this lady, Hannah Arendt. Okay, she's a smart lady. She wrote a book very extensive about what happened in the 1900s when culture went into the garbage can in Europe and in Russia. Okay, and here's some things she said. The discoverer of the role of forgiveness in human affairs was Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, and that's a beautiful truth. And the great book that demonstrates that's Quo Vadis by Henry Sienkiewicz, which basically contrasted how brutal and cruel the ancient Romans were in comparison with the early Christians. Okay, and then here she continues. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. There is a strange interdependence between thoughtlessness and evil. That phrase, this quote has been described as the banality of evil. Most evil is done by stupid people who are just following orders, and they say, "Oh, I'm just following orders." And everybody used to mock the bad behavior in Europe in the 1930s that was just expressed as following orders. But now they're doing it in the modern world again. Okay, they're squelching out free speech, and if you don't have free speech, you don't have freedom much longer. Okay, she continues. One of the greatest advantages of totalitarian elites was to turn any statement of fact into a question of motive. That's a common way to argue, is when a person realizes they can't win based on truth and logic, then they try to turn it into a motive and an insult. Okay, well, you're, a racist, you're a homophobic, you're a bigot, you're a misogynist, you're patriarchal, all this BS, because they can't, they really have nothing to stand on. You can't unify a culture based on drag queen story hour. Okay, that's gaslighting done by big money to destroy the heterosexual family. Okay, to destroy Christianity, eventually make the Bible illegal, make Christianity illegal. And when that comes, there will be no freedom for anyone. Okay? Power corresponds. Men can only make sense of an experience to the extent they can talk about it. That's another reason why they don't want people talking to each other, because a lot of people, they can't think that well on their own, but if they can have a conversation with someone else and work towards the truth, all of a sudden they make pretty useful observations. Okay, it's important that people can freely speak to each other, okay, and not always be, hassled. Okay, power corresponds to the human ability not just to act, but to act in concert. Power is never the property of an individual. It belongs to a group, and it remains in existence only so long as the group keeps together. That's an important point. Them that are whole have no need of a physician. Okay, this is Dostoevsky, Brothers Karamazov. Oh, I think there was a page. Oh, okay, you know what? I think I'm going to stop with that, and that'll be the end for today. Hope that was helpful.